we got a non-hand call, not like necessarily a situation, but I think just a general sort of live poker question that could be interesting. Heath, you are up next, sir.
Hey Bart,
How's it going?
what's up, man?
How's it going, Heath? So, Michael G set this call up. So, you have a question. You're just getting back into live poker. Is that right?
Not, I wouldn't say getting back into live poker. I've essentially been in the live poker for quite some time. I mean, yeah, I've been playing for a long time now. I
Okay.
just recently I recently left a full time job, I would say, to basically kind of pursue poker.
I hope you didn't like your job or it didn't really have a career path for you.
So my background is very interesting. I've grown up in home games and like done like home games. I've done dealing in home games and run my own private game for like almost like 15-ish, 16-ish years. And at the same time was also for like 7 of those years was also a school teacher.
Okay.
So I kind of like I just had like a good opportunity come across my way. And, obviously teaching is a great job, but you're not getting rich from it. And, just kind of life puts you in different directions. So I kind of just chose poker. And yeah, it's been great.
I mean, just before we even get to your question, just the reason why I said that was because I would highly, highly recommend anyone that's making good money in their regular career, and especially if they have the opportunity to move up, to not quit their job to play poker. You can always play poker on the side. Now, there are obviously unique situations. You might not like your job. You have no ability to move up in your career field, and you just want something to, to change to. But being a full-time poker pro, especially in the state of today's games where, the competition is tougher, is not something that I would necessarily recommend. It takes a special type of person, usually with a low nut, which means usually they're not going to have a family and they don't have many expenses. Because when you take a look at like the ceiling of how much can you make as a professional poker player, and most of the battle nowadays isn't even necessarily your skill if you want to make really good money. It's the politics of getting into the game. I mean, if you're a full-time poker player and a public game, like a true public game, not a quasi-private game inside a casino, the top end of your salary is just capped. Your salary, the amount of money is capped. But I know that. What was your question though?
Yeah, and I agree with you totally. So I couldn't agree more actually. For me, it's just I got a good situation. I'm married, wife works, whatever. It kind of works out. But yeah, so I guess kind of getting into it, this kind of goes along with kind of where I'm at in my field of poker at this point. Is I play a lot of games in the local area. I mean, I live in Rockland County, New York, so there's not exactly a casino like right around the corner. So
Okay.
it's kind of like whenever I'm going to stretch out, it's either the Borgata or Massachusetts or somewhere that's going to cost me at least an hour drive.
Okay.
And I guess the reason for my call and my issues, I guess, in my head have been, as I've been playing around these games, some 2-5 games down at Borgata, some 5-10 games at Borgata, you start listening to like a little bit of the chatter, especially once you get into like the higher stakes games. And it wasn't until this month in January where I was down at Borgata, and I basically overheard a couple of what I deemed to be pretty good pros at the table talking about some cheating rings that they were suspecting at some local games that I'm considering like trying out. And it just, for me, as like a person that is on the outside of like what is like like my regular home based casino, it just kind of, I just got really turned off, and this is not the first time that I've heard about like things like this. I've heard, I don't want to like throw out all the casino names out there. It's just like as you move up in poker, whether it's home game related or casino related, I think people are greedy. Money is, when you start playing with big money, people get greedy, I guess. And I guess it's just like this is what's in my head, right? I'm a little worried about moving up and trying to shot take in a game with essentially 8 or 9 players that I have no idea who they are, and probably half of them are pros.
So when you're talking about local games, okay? Because I got to split this off. Are you talking about your concern in casino games? Because that's what
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, listen, you probably even know better than I do if you ran a home game. I've got some things to say about this, okay? In terms of like my list of things that I am concerned about when I go to live poker, being cheated is far, far at the bottom of the list in a public game. Okay. Now, some people might call me naive, and I'm not saying that there hasn't been cheating that has gone on in live poker. I remember from the email we were kind of discussing, and Michael G and I were going back and forth about that father-son duo in PLO that was like marking the cards. I don't know if they were arrested at MGM Springfield, and then they were in Florida, and then they got called out at Philly Live, but they just left their chips, or they didn't get arrested or something like that. But to be honest with you, like, that's like a story that really few and far between of an actual sort of cheating sort of scheme in live poker outside of live streams. That's a whole different boat. I'm talking about non-live streamed live poker, because it is in the casino's best interest to keep a straight game. Now, could there be card marking and stuff like that? Can there be collusion? I suppose, but I gotta be honest with you, like, the people, especially at the 2-5 level and below, that are colluding are really morons. I mean, I remember seeing people try to collude, like, and I knew they were trying to collude at Commerce, and I'm like, let these guys collude. I don't even care. Like, they're so bad, it doesn't even matter. What I would be more concerned about, and I'm not super familiar with New York, and we'll put a link to it in this particular video, is keeping good personal standards and practices if you're going to be a full-time player on how you leave the casino and not being a target for robbery. That is way, way higher up my priority list when I was playing full-time. And I think it should be when you are, about how do I avoid getting into a situation where I get myself killed, injured, or robbed and not be a target when leaving the casino. You know, we did this whole interview with a longtime CLP subscriber, Ilya. I think it was like a year or two ago, where he got robbed at gunpoint coming back from a game in Florida. I've heard these stories. Knock on wood, I have never been robbed, but my head is on a swivel, especially in Texas. That was actually where I felt the least safe, was in Texas. I didn't really feel super unsafe in California, and that was because I utilized players' banks, and at that time they had a box. They didn't have any of that stuff in Texas. People knew that these large live streams were going on, but that would be like my number one priority, is not getting robbed. In terms of actual cheating, I wouldn't let that dissuade you in a casino game. Now, in a private game, yeah, I'd be fucking concerned. But you can really speak to that probably. And there's other things to be concerned about too in private games, like if these games are on credit, not getting paid, getting slow paid, getting stiffed, all those things. That's why I never dealt with private games. Go ahead.
So I like all your points, and obviously your main point of being, hurt is obviously way more severe than potentially getting cheated. So I agree with you on all fronts there. I guess and also just to make a point here is that I'm not really I agree 100%. Like, I'm never worried about getting cheated at the 2-5 limit. It's like these guys can't, as Mark Boone would say, right? Like, they can't even spell cheat. So it's like I don't worry about those kind of things.
Uh-huh.
But I do worry though, Bart. Like, the one game that's 5-10, at the one casino that's only 5-10, right? The one table with the same players all the time, right? Like, you go into Parks, you go into Borgata, yeah, you can sit at 5 different 2-5 games if you want. You got your choice. Take one. But it's like, you start going into these casinos and you start noticing, I mean, Parks might be a different, it might be a slightly different, maybe because they got tons of tables, right? But like, most of these places don't have, and I'm not saying that it's happening. I guess I'm just saying, like, that's where I start to get worried, is like, if I'm moving up, it's like, I'm moving up into this game that's so niche for this casino, even though I agree with you. It's like, I'm not thinking like the casinos in it, right? Or they don't have like a part of it. Yes, it's in their best interest to know, but I guess it's just like, sometimes after hearing what I heard basically about like a potential cheating ring at like a 10 and a quarter game in one of the local casinos, I started thinking like, man, like, how am I ever going to know if like 2 or 3 of these guys, like one kid was saying that like they noticed like 3 people on like the same app at like a texting app at like 11 in the morning, 10 in the morning. Yeah, it could be, who knows? Like, who could ever prove if 2 or 3 pros in a game are just sitting there sharing information about their hand. And I agree with you. It's like probably I shouldn't worry too much. I guess it's just I got a bad feeling when I got a bad taste in my mouth when I overheard that.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, are you concerned about, listen, colluding is a form of cheating, but it sounds to me like forget about, we'll address this texting thing in a second, but it sounds to me like you're more concerned about colluding,
Yes.
people colluding as opposed to like somebody marking cards or working with a team or something like that.
I mean, you could be working as a team colluding, but yes, that's what I'm referring to more.
Right.
Is colluding in the higher stakes games. Yep.
Because the thing about that though is that like, how long can that actually last for though? Like how long, whether it's cheating or colluding, can a team like last for without somebody saying something? That's why it's not overly concerning to me in terms of like a long-term thing, because what about everybody else in the game? They're seeing the same type of thing that you are. Now, I will say, you make a good point about like, I've seen people play on these app games and stuff, and like, it just seems to be like part of the game that like people are playing. I will give it, I've been pretty hard on my local casino here, Encore Boston Harbor, for some of the shit that they've done, although they've gotten better, like, not having money like up in the cage and not being able to cash out. One of the things they actually strictly do enforce, and I think we're going to see this more and more, is they do not allow you to be on your phone texting while in a hand. And they strictly enforce that because I'm constantly taking notes, right? I go in like once or twice a week and I'm taking notes about my hands for the flagship podcast. So sometimes if I play a hand, I'm taking notes, it spills over to the next hand, I'm still on my phone. They're like, you have to put your phone down or your hand is dead. God bless them for that. I think that's a really good rule. I think as things, computers and AI or whatever you want to call it, get more powerful, whether it's real-time solvers, whatever, I think at some point, every casino, and it's harder in a cash game as it is in a tournament, I think they're going to be like no phones in some fashion. I don't know if it's like in between. Didn't they just make a rule? They made a rule at the WSOP that you can't have any type of like solver up like in the tournament area. Now, this is far, far away from, not being able to use your phone and some of your sort of concerns as well. But at a certain point, that's also cheating if somebody can be on their phone and using a solve somehow during the hand. Now, the mechanics of that is hard. But as things get easy, GTO Wizard and stuff like that, or somebody comes up with an app that's specifically for that, it hasn't really come about because there's probably not that much money to be made with that type of app. Like in live poker, that would be something of a concern. If you remember like Google Glass, like back in the day, that was a big flop. We were talking about that 10, 15 years ago. What if all of a sudden this becomes like widespread where people are, at some point the eyepieces are coming, right? With like AI, people are going to have earpieces, some sort of glasses thing. That will have to be addressed. But to kind of like wrap your question in a bow, I really wouldn't be overly concerned about that as moving up as like a main priority, but you can just diligently watch the people in those games. But I can't believe that the guys would be able to stick around and be like long-term colluders and have that game still go on.
Right. I think that is what my big takeaway from this one is, that how long can they actually really do it? Right. It's like, and even in my experience, honestly, Bart, as we close out, even in my experience with home games, like if I had two guys or three all of a sudden enter the home game, it's like we don't even really know where they're coming from. They wouldn't stick around for too long.
Right.
They'd only be there for a short amount of time.
Right.
You're talking like 2 months. They try to mix it up, get what they got, and then it's like you never heard from them again. So I agree exactly with what you said there. I think that was a smart point.
Yeah. And again, like I said, if you're getting back into the swing of things and you are in a routine where you are going maybe to the same casino all the time, don't become a target. Just try to figure out the best way to not become a target. That would be my main priority. I don't know if these casinos have the ability to use player banks. Don't walk around with a bunch of cash if possible. I'll repeat the same thing again. And, people kind of giggle at this. I remember when Bobby Hoff was alive, he had this conversation that made perfect sense. I think I relayed this to Ilya. He said, the best way to survive a robbery, if you're just a target, and he was always playing like in the biggest games, was actually to keep some money on you. not keep zero, but a few $100 where if you were to ever get robbed, you could actually hand over some money as opposed to having nothing. And the robber thought that you were trying to like hold out on him or something like that. And then, of course, the opposite side to that is if you have a bunch of money on you, you don't want to have that happen as well. These little things, just little things to think about. Thanks for the call, Heath. I appreciate it.